Maya Chen had been saving money for almost a year. Every extra dollar from her paycheck went into a special savings account. She skipped her morning coffee runs. She packed lunches instead of eating out. She even picked up extra shifts at the marketing firm where she worked. All of this sacrifice was for one reason. Her mother was turning 60, and Maya wanted to celebrate with her in person. Her mother lived in Sydney, Australia. They hadn't seen each other in almost 3 years because of the distance and the cost of travel. But this birthday was different. 60 years old? A milestone that deserved something special. Maya decided she would fly to Sydney and surprise her mother. And for the first time in her 28 years of life, she would do it in first class. The ticket cost her nearly $4,000. It was more money than she had ever spent on anything besides her car. But when she clicked the purchase button on her laptop, she felt a rush of excitement that made every sacrifice worth it. She imagined the look on her mother's face when she showed up at the door. She imagined the comfortable seat, the fancy meals, the champagne, and the experience of being treated like someone important for once in her life. The day of the flight arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Maya woke up at 4 in the morning even though her flight wasn't until 9. She was too excited to sleep anyway. She had laid out her outfit the night before. A nice pair of black pants, a cream-colored blouse, and a blazer she had bought specifically for this trip. She wanted to look the part. She wanted to feel like she belonged in first class. She arrived at the airport 3 hours early. She checked her bag and made her way through security without any problems. Then she walked toward her gate, her heart beating a little faster with every step. She had never been to the first-class lounge before. She showed her boarding pass to the woman at the desk, half expecting to be turned away. But the woman smiled and welcomed her inside. The lounge was everything Maya had imagined and more. Soft leather chairs, free snacks and drinks, quiet conversations, and the smell of fresh coffee. She found a seat by the window and looked out at the planes on the runway. She felt proud of herself. She had worked hard for this moment. She had earned it. When boarding time came, Maya gathered her things and walked to the gate. First-class passengers were invited to board first. She had seen this happen many times from the back of the line, watching wealthy-looking people disappear into the jet bridge while everyone else waited. Now it was her turn. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent and stepped onto the plane. The first-class cabin was at the front of the aircraft. The seats were enormous compared to what she was used to. Each one had its own little pod with a screen, a reading light, and enough space to stretch out completely. Maya found her seat, 3A, right by the window. She put her carry-on bag in the overhead bin and settled into her seat. The leather was soft. The blanket was already waiting for her, neatly folded. She couldn't stop smiling. That smile didn't last long. A flight attendant approached her within minutes of sitting down. The woman was tall with blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her name tag read Gloria. She looked at Maya with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't exactly unfriendly, but it wasn't warm either. It was the kind of look someone gives when they're sizing you up. "Excuse me," Gloria said. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Maya reached into her purse and pulled it out. She handed it over with a polite smile. Gloria studied it for what felt like a very long time. Her eyes moved from the boarding pass to Maya's face and back again. Finally, she handed it back. "Just making sure you're in the right section," Gloria said. Her voice was flat. No apology. No welcome aboard. She turned and walked away. Maya felt her cheeks grow warm. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe Gloria asked everyone for their boarding pass. Maybe it was standard procedure. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She had watched other passengers board before her. Nobody else had been asked as she shook off the feeling and tried to focus on the excitement of the trip. More passengers filled the cabin. A businessman in an expensive suit sat across the aisle. An older couple settled into the seats behind her. Everyone seemed relaxed and comfortable, like they did this all the time. Maya reminded herself that she had every right to be here. She had paid for this seat just like everyone else. A few minutes later, Gloria returned with a cart. She was offering champagne to passengers before takeoff. Maya watched as she poured glasses for the businessman, the older couple, and a woman sitting 2 rows ahead. When Gloria reached Maya's row, she paused. "Would you like some champagne?" Gloria asked, but her tone had changed. It was colder now, almost challenging. "Yes, please," Maya said, keeping her voice friendly. Gloria looked at the cart, then back at Maya. "I'm sorry, we've actually run out. I'll see if I can find another bottle." Maya glanced at the cart. There was a bottle of champagne sitting right there, clearly visible, still half full. She opened her mouth to say something, then stopped herself. She didn't want to cause a scene. She didn't want to be that person who complained about everything. So she just nodded and said okay. Gloria moved on without another word. Maya watched her pour champagne for the next passenger from the same bottle she had just claimed was empty. The sting of it hit Maya harder than she expected. She wasn't imagining things. She wasn't being paranoid. This woman was treating her differently, and there was only one reason Maya could think of. She was the only person in first class who looked like her. The only one who didn't fit whatever picture Gloria had in her head of who belonged in these seats. Maya blinked back tears and turned toward the window. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her upset. She had worked too hard to be here. She had earned this seat. She belonged here just as much as anyone else. The plane began to taxi toward the runway. The captain's voice came over the speakers, welcoming everyone aboard Pacific Continental Airlines Flight 108 into Sydney. He mentioned the flight time, the weather, and wished everyone a pleasant journey. His voice was calm and professional. Maya tried to let it soothe her nerves. The plane lifted off the ground and climbed into the sky. Maya watched the city shrink below her, the buildings turning into tiny boxes, the cars becoming dots on gray ribbons of highway. She loved this part of flying. The way everything that seemed so big and important on the ground suddenly looked so small from above. It reminded her that the world was vast and that her problems, whatever they were just tiny pieces of a much bigger picture. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. The flight would be long, almost 14 hours. She decided to sleep through as much of it as she could. When she woke up, she would be closer to her mother, closer to the surprise, closer to the happiness that was waiting for her on the other side of the world. She didn't know it yet, but sleep would not bring her any closer to peace. In just a few hours, her dream trip would turn into a nightmare she never could have imagined. And the woman named Gloria was only getting started. Maya slept for about 3 hours. It wasn't the deep, restful sleep she had hoped for. It was the kind of sleep where you drift in and out, never fully relaxing, always aware of the hum of the engines and the slight movements of the plane. But it was enough to take the edge off her exhaustion. When she opened her eyes, the cabin was dim. Most of the window shades were pulled down, and the overhead lights had been turned off. A few passengers were watching movies on their screens. Others were sleeping under their blankets. The plane had settled into that quiet, peaceful rhythm that happens during long overnight flights. Maya stretched her arms and shifted in her seat. Her neck was a little stiff, but otherwise she felt okay. She glanced at the flight map on her screen. They were somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, still about 11 hours from Sydney. A long way to go. She needed to use the restroom. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up slowly, careful not to disturb the passenger next to her, an older man who was sound asleep with an eye mask on. She made her way down the aisle toward the lavatory at the front of the first-class cabin. The restroom was occupied, so she waited. She stood there quietly, looking at nothing in particular, just waiting her turn like anyone would. After a minute or two, the door opened and a woman stepped out. Maya went inside, did what she needed to do, washed her hands, and came back out. The whole thing took maybe 4 minutes. She walked back to her seat and sat down. She pulled her blanket over her lap and picked up the menu to see what breakfast options would be available later. Everything seemed normal. Everything felt calm. She had no idea that her 4-minute trip to the restroom had just set something terrible in motion about 20 minutes past. Maya was watching a movie on her screen, some romantic comedy she had seen before, but didn't mind watching again. She had her headphones on, the volume turned low, just enjoying the distraction. Then she felt a tap on her shoulder. She pulled off her headphones and looked up. Gloria was standing there. But she wasn't alone. Two men stood behind her. They were dressed in plain clothes, but something about them felt official. They had that serious look in their eyes, the kind that told you they weren't here for small talk. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," one of the men said. His voice was low, almost a whisper, like he was trying not to wake the other passengers. Maya's heart jumped. "What? Why? Is something wrong?" "Please just come with us," the other man said. "We need to ask you some questions." Maya looked at Gloria. The flight attendant's face was calm, but there was something else there too. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. Like she was enjoying this. "I don't understand," Maya said. Her voice was shaking now. "What is this about?" Gloria leaned in closer. "A passenger has reported that her handbag is missing from the overhead bin. You were seen near the bins earlier. We need to sort this out?" Maya felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. A missing handbag. And they thought she took it. They actually thought she was a thief. "I didn't take anything," Maya said. Her voice came out louder than she meant it to. A few passengers nearby stirred and looked over. "I just went to the bathroom. That's all. I didn't touch anyone's bag." "Ma'am, please keep your voice down," one of the men said. "We're federal air marshals. We just need to ask you a few questions. If you haven't done anything wrong, this will be cleared up quickly." Air marshals. The words hit Maya like a punch to the stomach. This was serious. This was really happening. She looked around the cabin, hoping someone would speak up, hoping someone would say this was a mistake. But the other passengers just stared. Some of them had already pulled out their phones. They were recording. Maya's eyes filled with tears. This couldn't be real. She was a marketing coordinator from Seattle. She had never stolen anything in her life. She had saved for a year just to buy this ticket. And now she was being accused of theft in front of everyone. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't do anything. You can check my bag. You can check everything I have. I didn't take anything." Gloria stepped forward. In her hand was a pair of plastic zip-tie handcuffs. "It's standard procedure," she said. "Until we can verify the situation, we need to restrain you. For the safety of the other passengers." Maya stared at the handcuffs. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of nightmare. She would wake up any second now, back in her seat, and everything would be fine. But she didn't wake up. Because this wasn't a dream. "Please stand up and put your hands in front of you," one of the marshals said. Maya's legs felt like they were made of water. She stood up slowly, her whole body trembling. She held out her hands. The plastic cuffs clicked around her wrists. The sound was small, but to Maya it felt like the loudest thing she had ever heard. The tears were falling freely now. She couldn't stop them. She didn't even try. She just stood there, hands bound, while dozens of eyes watched her. While phones recorded her. While Gloria looked on with that same calm expression, like this was all perfectly normal. "This way, please," the marshal said. He put a hand on her arm and guided her toward the back of the plane. The walk through the cabin was the longest walk of Maya's life. Every row she passed, she felt the stares. She heard the whispers. She saw the phones pointed at her face. Some people looked sympathetic. Others looked suspicious. A few even looked angry, like they had already decided she was guilty. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them all that she was innocent. That she had done nothing wrong. That this was all a terrible mistake. But the words wouldn't come. Her throat was too tight. Her chest was too heavy. All she could do was walk and cry and hope that somehow, some way. This would all be over soon. They brought her to the rear galley, the small kitchen area at the back of the plane where the flight attendants prepared meals and drinks. It was cramped and cold. The marshals had her sit on a small jump seat near the emergency exit. Gloria stood nearby, filling out some kind of form on a clipboard. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" one of the marshals asked. His voice was a little softer now. Maybe he could see how scared she was. Maya told him everything. She told him about boarding the plane, about sitting in her seat, about going to the bathroom and coming straight back. She told him she never touched anyone's belongings. She never even looked at the overhead bins except to put her own bag away at the start of the flight. The marshal listened. He nodded, but he didn't remove the handcuffs. The passenger who reported the theft says she saw you acting suspiciously near the bins, he said. She says you were looking around like you were checking if anyone was watching. Maya shook her head. That's not true. I was just waiting for the bathroom. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Gloria looked up from her clipboard. I also observed her behavior earlier. She seemed nervous when she boarded. Kept looking around. It raised some red flags for me. Maya stared at her. The lies were so casual, so matter-of-fact. This woman was making things up, and she was doing it without a hint of guilt. I wasn't nervous, Maya said. I was excited. This was my first time flying first class. I was just looking around because everything was new to me. Nobody said anything. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. Maya could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Somewhere in this plane there was a handbag. And somewhere there was the truth. But right now, sitting in the back of the plane with her hands tied and her reputation in pieces, the truth felt very far away. She didn't know that help was closer than she thought. She didn't know that in just a few minutes, someone very important would step out of the cockpit. And when he saw what was happening to his daughter, everything would change. Maya sat on that cold jump seat for what felt like hours. In reality, it was probably only 15 or 20 minutes. But when you're sitting in the back of an airplane with your hands tied and your dignity stripped away, time moves differently. Every second feels like a lifetime. She had stopped crying. Not because she felt better, but because she had run out of tears. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her nose was stuffy. Her whole body felt heavy, like someone had filled her bones with sand. She just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of how her dream trip had turned into this nightmare. The two air marshals stood nearby, talking quietly to each other. They seemed uncomfortable. Maybe they could tell something wasn't right about this situation. Maybe they had doubts. But they were following procedure, and procedure said to keep her restrained until the situation was resolved. Gloria was still there too, leaning against the galley counter, looking at her phone like nothing unusual was happening, like she hadn't just destroyed an innocent woman's life. Every now and then she would glance at Maya with that same cold expression. No guilt, no doubt. Just quiet satisfaction. Maya wanted to say something. She wanted to demand answers. She wanted to ask why Gloria had targeted her from the moment she stepped on this plane. But what was the point? Nobody was listening to her. Nobody believed her. She was just the suspicious woman from first class who didn't belong there. The plane hummed along through the night sky. Somewhere below them was nothing but dark ocean stretching for thousands of miles. Maya thought about her mother waiting in Sydney. She thought about the surprise she had planned, the birthday cake she was going to order, the look on her mother's face when she showed up at the door. Would any of that happen now? Or would she be arrested the moment the plane landed? She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. A trick she had learned years ago to calm herself down during stressful moments. It wasn't working very well right now, but she kept trying anyway. It was the only thing she could control. Then she heard a sound that made her heart skip. The cockpit door opened. Maya looked up. A man stepped out of the cockpit into the forward galley. He was wearing a pilot's uniform, 4 stripes on his shoulders. The captain. He was tall with graying hair and a calm, professional demeanor. He walked into the first-class cabin, probably doing one of those routine walks that pilots sometimes do during long flights to stretch their legs and check on things. Maya watched him through the gap in the curtain that separated the galley from the main cabin. She couldn't see his face clearly from this angle. He stopped to chat with one of the flight attendants. Then he continued walking down the aisle, nodding politely to passengers. Looking completely at ease, Gloria suddenly stood up straighter. She smoothed down her uniform and put her phone away. She looked nervous. Maya noticed the change immediately. Why would a flight attendant be nervous about the captain walking through the cabin? The captain kept walking. He passed through the first-class cabin, then through the curtain into business class. A minute later, he appeared at the back of the plane. Stepping into the rear galley where Maya was being held, he stopped when he saw her. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The captain stood there, staring at Maya with an expression that shifted from confusion to recognition to something that looked like shock. His face went pale. His eyes widened. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Maya looked up at him. There was something familiar about his face, something she couldn't quite place. Her mind was so foggy from stress and exhaustion that it took her a few seconds to process what she was seeing. Then it hit her. She knew this man. She knew him better than almost anyone in the world. "Dad?" she whispered. The word hung in the air like a fragile thing, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Captain William Chun stared at his daughter, his only child. The girl he had raised on his own after her mother moved back to Australia when Maya was 10. The girl he had taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked down the aisle at her college graduation. She was sitting in the back of his plane, hands bound with plastic restraints. Tears dried on her cheeks, looking at him with a mixture of hope and despair. "Maya?" His voice cracked. "What? What is happening here?" The two air marshals exchanged looks. They had no idea who this woman was to the captain. Gloria's face had gone from nervous to something closer to terror. She took a small step backward like she was trying to disappear into the wall. "Sir," one of the marshals said, "this passenger is being detained on suspicion of theft." A first-class passenger reported her handbag missing and identified this woman as a suspect. Captain Chen didn't even look at the marshal? His eyes were fixed on his daughter. "Take those off," he said. His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it, the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. "Sir, with respect, we have procedures to follow. I said take them off." This time his voice was louder, harder. "Now," the marshals hesitated. They looked at each other, then at Gloria, then back at the captain. Something in his eyes must have convinced them, because one of them stepped forward and cut the zip ties from Maya's wrists. She rubbed her wrists where the plastic had dug into her skin. Red marks circled them like bracelets. She looked up at her father, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something other than fear. She felt safe. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't do anything. I swear. I just went to the bathroom. I never touched anyone's bag. They just came and took me, and everyone was watching and recording, and I didn't know what to do." He knelt down in front of her and took her hands in his. "It's okay. I'm here now. Just breathe." She nodded, trying to calm down. But the tears were coming back. Relief mixed with trauma, mixed with exhaustion. It all poured out of her in waves. Captain Chun stood up and turned to face the others. His expression had changed. The gentle father was gone. In his place was something much more formidable. This was a man who had spent 30 years flying planes, managing crews, handling emergencies at 40,000 feet. And just 2 weeks ago, he had been named the interim CEO of Pacific Continental Airlines after the previous CEO resigned suddenly due to a scandal. He was no longer just the captain of this flight. He was the head of the entire airline. And someone on his plane had just handcuffed his innocent daughter in front of 200 passengers. "I want to know exactly what happened," he said. "Every detail. From the beginning." The marshals started to explain. They told him about the theft report, about Gloria identifying Maya as a suspect, about the decision to restrain her. As they spoke, Captain Chun's jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Then he turned to Gloria. She was pressed against the counter, her face white as paper. She knew. She knew exactly what was coming. "You," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You did this?" Gloria opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time since Maya had met her, the confident flight attendant had nothing to say. Captain Chun looked at his daughter, then back at Gloria. The pieces were falling into place. The cold treatment from the moment Maya boarded. The champagne that was supposedly gone? The suspicious behavior that existed only in Gloria's imagination. "This isn't over," he said to Gloria. "Not by a long way." He turned back to Maya and helped her to her feet. "Come with me," he said gently. "We're going to fix this." As he led her out of the galley, Maya glanced back at Gloria one last time. The woman who had treated her like a criminal, who had lied about her, who had watched her be humiliated in front of an entire plane full of people. Gloria looked terrified. And for the first time that night, Maya felt something she hadn't expected. She felt hope. Captain Chun led Maya to the small crew rest area near the front of the plane. It was a tiny space with a couple of seats where flight attendants could take breaks during long flights. He helped her sit down and handed her a bottle of water. His hands were steady, but Maya could see the anger burning behind his eyes. He was holding it in for her sake. "Drink this," he said softly. "Take your time. When you're ready, tell me everything." Maya took a long sip of water. Her throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. She took a deep breath and started from the beginning. She told him about boarding the plane and Gloria asking for her boarding pass. She told him about the champagne that was suddenly gone. She told him about falling asleep and waking up to use the bathroom. She told him about the marshals appearing at her seat, the accusation, the handcuffs, the walk of shame through the cabin while people recorded her with their phones. By the time she finished, her father's face had turned to stone. He sat perfectly still, listening to every word. When she was done, he didn't say anything for a long moment. He just sat there, processing everything his daughter had been through. "Stay here," he finally said. "I need to handle this." He stood up and walked out of the crew rest area. Maya watched him go, her heart pounding. She had never seen her father this angry. He was usually so calm, so measured. Even when she was a teenager and did stupid things, he never lost his temper. But this was different. Someone had hurt his daughter. Someone had humiliated her in public. And that someone was about to face consequences. Captain Chun walked back to the rear galley where Gloria and the two air marshals were waiting. The marshals stood at attention when they saw him coming. Gloria tried to do the same, but her legs were visibly shaking. "I want to speak with the passenger who reported the theft," Captain Chun said. His voice was calm, but carried an edge that made everyone in the galley straighten up. One of the marshals nodded. "I'll bring her back here, sir." A few minutes later, the marshal returned with a woman in her 50s. She had blonde hair and wore expensive jewelry. She looked confused and a little annoyed at being summoned to the back of the plane. "What's going on?" she asked. "I was trying to sleep." "Ma'am, I'm the captain of this aircraft," Captain Chun said. "I understand you reported a stolen handbag. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" The woman sighed like this was all a big inconvenience. "I put my handbag in the overhead bin before takeoff. When I woke up a little while ago, I went to get something from it and it was gone. Someone must have taken it." "And you identified the young woman who was just restrained as the thief?" The woman hesitated. She glanced at Gloria, then back at the captain. "Well, I didn't actually see her take it, but the flight attendant said she saw her acting suspicious near the bins, looking around like she was checking if anyone was watching." Captain Sheen turned to Gloria. "Is that what you told her?" Gloria's face had gone from pale to almost gray. I was just reporting what I observed, sir." The passenger seemed nervous when she boarded. She kept looking around. "I thought it was worth mentioning." "She kept looking around because it was her first time in first class," Captain Chun said. "She was excited. She was taking in the experience." "That's not suspicious behavior. That's human behavior." Gloria opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Captain Chun turned back to the woman who had made the accusation. "Ma'am, I need you to think very carefully. Did you actually see the young woman take your handbag? Did you see her open the overhead bin? Did you see her with your belongings at any point?" The woman shifted uncomfortably. "No," she admitted. I didn't see anything. I just assumed. Because of what the flight attendant said, you assumed. Captain Chun let the word hang in the air. Based on the word of a flight attendant who had already shown hostility toward this passenger from the moment she boarded, he turned to one of the marshals. Have you actually searched for the handbag? The marshal looked embarrassed. We were going to search after securing the suspect, sir. Standard procedure is to investigate before you restrain someone, before you humiliate them in front of an entire cabin full of passengers, before you let them be recorded and judged by 200 strangers. His voice was rising now. That young woman you handcuffed is innocent. And more than that, she's my daughter. The words landed like a bomb. The woman who had made the accusation gasped. The marshals exchanged horrified looks. Gloria looked like she might faint. Your daughter? The woman whispered. My daughter, who saved for a year to buy a first-class ticket, who has never stolen anything in her life, who was treated like a criminal because of assumptions and prejudice, and a flight attendant who decided she didn't belong in this cabin. Captain Chun pointed at the overhead bins in the first-class cabin. Search them. All of them. Right now. The marshals moved quickly. They opened every overhead bin in first class, checking each one carefully. It took less than 5 minutes to find what they were looking for. Sir, one of the marshals called out. I found it. He held up a designer handbag. It was in the overhead bin directly above the woman's seat. The same bin she claimed to have checked. The same bin she said was empty. The woman's face turned red. I must have missed it. It was dark. I didn't look carefully enough. You didn't look carefully enough, Captain Chun repeated. But you were careful enough to accuse an innocent woman of stealing it. The woman couldn't meet his eyes. She took her handbag from the marshal and clutched it to her chest like a shield. I'm sorry, she mumbled. I didn't mean for this to happen. The flight attendant made it sound so certain. Captain Chun turned to Gloria. The flight attendant was trembling now. All her confidence, all her smugness had melted away. She looked small and scared. You are relieved of your duties for the remainder of this flight, he said. You will remain in the crew rest area until we land. When we arrive in Sydney, you will be met by airline security and human resources. There will be a full investigation into your conduct. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. Sir, please. I was just doing my job. I was trying to protect the passengers. You weren't protecting anyone. You were targeting a passenger because of your own prejudices. You lied about her behavior. You encouraged another passenger to make a false accusation. You had her restrained without any evidence. That's not doing your job. That's abuse of power. He looked at the marshals. I want both of you to document everything that happened tonight. Every detail. This will be part of the official record. The marshals nodded. They looked genuinely sorry for their part in what had happened. Captain Chun walked to the front of the first-class cabin. Passengers were awake now, watching to see what would happen next. Many of them still had their phones out. Good, he thought. Let them record this too. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice carrying through the cabin, I need to address something that happened earlier on this flight. A young woman was wrongfully accused of theft and restrained in front of all of you. I want you to know that she is completely innocent. The missing item was found exactly where it was left by its owner. There was no theft. There was only a terrible mistake driven by false assumptions. He paused, letting his words sink in. On behalf of Pacific Continental Airlines, I apologize to this passenger for the treatment she received. No one should ever be judged based on how they look or where they sit. This is not who we are as an airline. This is not who we should be as human beings. The cabin was silent. A few passengers lowered their phones. Others looked ashamed. One woman actually started clapping, and soon others joined in. It wasn't thunderous applause, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was support. Captain Chun walked back to the crew rest area where Maya was waiting. She had heard everything through the thin walls. When he opened the door, she stood up and threw her arms around him. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. He held her tight. I'm so sorry this happened to you. But I promise you it won't happen to anyone else. Not on my watch. Maya pulled back and looked at her father. For the first time that night, she saw something beyond the anger. She saw determination. She saw purpose. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about something bigger, and her father was going to make sure the world knew it. The rest of the flight passed quietly. Maya returned to her seat in first class, but everything felt different now. The passengers around her were polite. Some even smiled at her. A few came over to apologize for not speaking up earlier. One older gentleman handed her a handwritten note that said simply, "I'm sorry. You deserved better." Maya tucked the note into her purse. She wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her was grateful for the kindness. Another part of her wondered where all this kindness was when she was being marched down the aisle in handcuffs. But she tried not to dwell on that. She had learned a long time ago that holding on to bitterness only hurt. The person holding it, her father, checked on her several times during the remaining hours of the flight. He couldn't stay long because he still had a plane to fly, but every visit meant the world to her. He would squeeze her hand, ask if she needed anything, and remind her that she was loved. It was such a simple thing, but after everything she had been through, those small moments of connection felt like oxygen. When the plane finally touched down in Sydney, the sun was just coming up over the harbor. Golden light spilled across the runway, making everything glow. Maya looked out the window and felt tears prick her eyes again. But these were different tears. These were tears of relief. She had made it. She was here. And despite everything, she was going to see her mother. As the passengers filed off the plane, Captain Chun met Maya at the jet bridge. He was still in his uniform, looking tired but determined. Two airline security officers stood nearby, along with a woman in a business suit who introduced herself as the regional head of human resources. "We're going to handle this," Captain Chun told his daughter. "You go see your mother? Enjoy your trip. I'll take care of everything here." Maya hugged him one more time. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." He kissed her forehead. "That's what fathers are for." She walked through the airport in a daze. The arrivals hall was crowded with people waiting for loved ones. Maya scanned the crowd, looking for her mother's face. Then she spotted her. A small woman with silver-streaked hair, holding a sign that said, "My baby girl," with hearts drawn around the words. Maya ran. She didn't care how it looked. She didn't care that she was a grown woman sprinting through an airport like a child. She ran straight into her mother's arms and held on like she would never let go. "Maya, what's wrong?" her mother asked, feeling the desperation in her daughter's embrace. "What happened?" "I'll tell you everything," Maya said. "But right now, I just need to hold you." They stood there for a long time, mother and daughter, wrapped in each other's arms while the world moved around them. The days that followed were exactly what Maya needed. She spent time with her mother, cooking meals together, watching old movies, taking walks along the beach. She told her mother everything that had happened on the plane. Her mother listened with tears in her eyes, holding Maya's hand the whole time. "I'm so proud of you," her mother said when Maya finished. "You handled that with so much grace." "I don't know if I could have done the same." "I didn't feel graceful," Maya admitted. "I felt scared and humiliated and alone. But you didn't let it break you. That's what matters." Meanwhile, things were moving quickly back at Pacific Continental Airlines. True to his word, Captain Chun launched a full investigation into the incident. Gloria was terminated within a week. The investigation revealed that this wasn't her first offense. Other passengers had filed complaints about her behavior over the years, but nothing had ever been done. Those complaints had been buried or ignored. That was going to change. Captain Chun announced a complete overhaul of the airline's training programs. Every employee, from flight attendants to gate agents to customer service representatives, would undergo new training focused on bias awareness and proper procedures for handling accusations. No passenger would ever be restrained again without a thorough investigation first. No one would ever be treated like a criminal based on assumptions and prejudice. the story didn't stay quiet for long. The videos that passengers had recorded on the plane found their way onto social media. Within days, Maya's story was everywhere. News outlets picked it up. Talk shows discussed it. The hashtag Justice for Maya trended for almost a week. At first, Maya didn't want any part of it. She just wanted to forget the whole thing and move on with her life. But as the messages started pouring in, she began to change her mind. Thousands of people reached out to share their own stories. Stories of being judged unfairly. Stories of being accused of things they didn't do. Stories of feeling invisible or unwelcome in spaces they had every right to occupy. Maya realized she had a chance to do something meaningful. She could use her experience to help others. She could turn her pain into purpose. When she returned to Seattle, she started speaking out. She did interviews with news channels. She wrote articles for magazines. She gave talks at conferences about passenger rights and the importance of treating people with dignity. She wasn't angry or bitter in these appearances. She was calm and thoughtful. She focused on solutions rather than blame. And that approach resonated with people. Pacific Continental Airlines invited her to be part of their advisory board for customer experience. It was a volunteer position, but Maya accepted without hesitation. She wanted to make sure that what happened to her would never happen to anyone else. She worked with the company to develop new policies and training materials. She reviewed procedures and suggested changes. She even helped create a new system for passengers to report mistreatment anonymously. Her father stepped back from flying to focus fully on his role as CEO. It wasn't an easy transition. He had spent his entire adult life in the cockpit. Flying was in his blood. But he knew that he could do more good from the executive suite than from 30,000 feet. He could shape the culture of the entire airline. He could make Pacific Continental a place where every passenger felt valued and respected. 6 months after that terrible night, Maya boarded another flight to Sydney. Her mother's birthday had passed, but they had decided to celebrate together anyway. This time, Maya flew first class again. She had thought about choosing a different airline, but in the end, she wanted to see the changes for herself. The experience was completely different. The flight attendants were warm and welcoming. One of them recognized her and thanked her for everything she had done. The passengers around her were friendly. The whole atmosphere felt lighter, more human. As the plane took off and climbed into the sky, Maya looked out the window at the clouds below. She thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the humiliation, the anger, but also the love, the support, the change. She had walked onto a plane as a victim. She was walking off as an advocate. She had been handcuffed and accused of being a thief. Now she was helping shape the future of an entire industry. A flight attendant approached her seat with a smile. "Can I offer you some champagne, ma'am?" Maya smiled back. "Yes, please." The attendant poured a glass and handed it to her. "Welcome aboard. We're so glad to have you with us today." Maya took the glass and raised it slightly, as if making a toast to no one in particular. To her mother waiting in Sydney. To her father who had fought for her. To everyone who had shared their stories. To everyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. "Thank you," she said. "I'm glad to be here." And for the first time in a long time, she truly meant it. The sky stretched out before her, endless and full of possibility. Whatever came next, Maya knew she was ready. She had been through the fire. And she had come out stronger on the other side. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning.